Hi, American Lit students. We are going to be talking today about the 3.08 graded assignment, How to Read a Poem Brochure. So here are the basics. You're going to be able to find the assignment document in the 3.06 and 3.08 lesson modules. If you click the next arrow after this video, you'll be taken to the assignment document. It is worth 45 points. You're going to have 3 days to complete the assignment, and the finished product is going to be a brochure written about a poem of your choosing. In this assignment, you will create a brochure that explains to your audience how to read a poem deeply to understand the meaning, form, and craft of the poem. You will start by choosing any poem that we've read in Unit 2 or 3, or if you're up for a challenge, you can choose another poem from the modern poetry or poetry of the Harlem Renaissance sections of your textbook. That's all fine. You will walk through the steps of reading a poem using the poem that you have chosen as an example in your brochure. So as you're working on it, you'll want to keep in mind the essential questions from Unit 3, which are: how did literature reflect the American experience during the Modernist and Harlem Renaissance eras? How do sound and form impact a poet's meaning? And what strategies can readers use to increase comprehension and appreciation of poetry? So the steps that you're going to use in the brochure are: step 1, reading the poem. And for this step, you're going to share the poem within the brochure so that your reader could read it. In step 2, you're going to discuss understanding the context of the poem. In step 3, you're going to summarize the poem. Step 4 is identifying any poetic devices that are present within the poem. Step 5 is analyzing meaning. Step 6 is identifying qualities of the literary era. And finally, you'll end with a works cited section of your brochure. This is what your brochure is going to look like. It's essentially a 2-paged document, which you'll have to imagine the 2 pages being printed double-sided on one sheet of paper that was folded up and might be presented about the poem that somebody could pick up and read. It's an informational brochure. So this is the general layout, what it's going to look at. Let's take a closer look at the different steps and components of the brochure. So step 1 is reading the poem. You're going to copy the text of the poem, the title, and the author's full name onto your brochure from our textbook or from the web. This is what it's going to look like. So here I've chosen step 1, There Will Come Soft Rains by Sarah Teasdale. So you're going to include the title of the poem itself, and the poet in this step. In step 2, you're going to discuss understanding the context. So you're going to include relevant information about the author's life and background, as well as the historical or social context of the poem. So you'll discuss the important things to understand when we're discussing this poem. So about the author, here's information about the author here shared, and then the second part of this would be background information about There Will Come Soft Rain. Maybe discuss when it was published, what it discusses. For instance, it mentions a war, which is most likely a reference to World War I. So you'll want to discuss the information, the historical and social context of the poem so that the reader could better understand the poem. Step 3 is where you're going to summarize the poem. You'll identify the speaker and explain what is happening in the poem. So you'll again use the header of step 3, summarize the poem. What is the narrative voice? Who is the speaker? So in this case, the poem uses a third-person omniscient narrator. And so then you'll follow that with what is happening in the poem. So it's a summary of what happens in the poem for step 3. In step 4, you're going to identify poetic devices that are present within the poem. So you'll note the structure and rhyme scheme of the poem. You will also identify and find examples of poetic devices used, such as alliteration, metaphor, whatever other literary devices are present within your poem, you're going to highlight those and share those. This section is split into identifying structure, sound, rhyme, and more, and figurative language and imagery. So make sure you break that into the 2 separate components and discuss each. You can see examples of that here. Step 4, analyze poetic devices and focus specifically on structure, sound, rhyme, and more. And then in the second part of step 4 here, step 4 continued, analyze poetic devices. You're going to discuss the figurative language and imagery that is present within the poem. Step 5 is analyzing meaning. So you're going to identify the central theme of the poem and explain how the devices you've identified work together to create the poem's meaning and mood. So theme, remember that a theme is a statement that expands upon a theme topic. So for this, nature will persist without any regard for human destruction. That is the theme of the poem overall. And then you're going to analyze that and share an analysis of the meaning and how those devices that you've discussed in the previous steps work together to create that poem's meaning and mood. Step 6, you're going to identify the central theme of the poem and explain what modernist qualities are displayed through that theme. So you've stated the theme in the previous step. Now restate that here, the poem's central theme, in this case, that nature will persist without any regard for human destruction, displays, in this case, it's the disillusionment and cynicism that many modernist writers felt during and after World War I. So you're going to discuss in your poem how that's the case here. Explain the central theme and then what modernist qualities are displayed through that theme. That's step 6. For the final step, you're going to include your works cited. So in most cases, that would be a separate page. In this case, it's going to be a separate section of your brochure. You'll title that work cited, and you'll cite any sources that you've used. Please make sure that you're using MLA 8 formatting, and you can see an example of what that would look like here. So there is a brochure template that is provided for you in the OHS. So you don't have to create this from scratch. You're going to use the template. It's in lesson 3.06. You can create your own brochure with the required steps if you wish, but there is a template provided from you, so you don't have to do that. Change the words that are highlighted in gray to be a reflection of the poem that you have chosen. Each section has directions for what you should include. It's very specific, so you can go through that and use that as you're completing your brochure. Don't forget to change the picture to reflect the content and theme of your poem. And don't forget to include your name instead of just leaving it as student name. Make sure you're putting your name there and a picture that is reflective of the poem that you have chosen. There is an optional brochure planning guide that can help you in this process. You do not need to submit this guide. This is just for your use. So you can answer the questions at the end of the assignment document to help you gather information to include in your brochure. It's like having a notebook of all your notes that you've taken and that you've used. Again, don't submit this, but it can be useful for you in creating your brochure. The rubric is here. Let me see if I can get my picture out of the way. Oh, I guess it's just going to stay here. You have spent time with rubrics before. Make sure that you're taking a look at the rubric before you submit your brochure. It's going to be broken down into the points you'll earn for each criteria. Take a look at that. Make sure to focus on what you're aiming for. If you're aiming for 100%, make sure you're looking at this first column and what needs to be included in order to earn 100%. There is a section for each of the steps, so you can check out what is expected for each of those. So be sure to spend some time with the rubric before you submit it. And then you're going to complete your project. You're going to complete your project in a separate document and submit the file to the Dropbox. Don't forget to proofread before you submit, and submit to the 3.08 Dropbox by the due date. Above all, please reach out to me with any questions, all right? I am here to assist you, and I'm happy to do that. So if anything comes up as you're working on it, let me know and I will be there. Have a good day. Have fun with your project.